Hello everyone, this is the second video in my History of the Earth series, covering the third eon of Earth's history, the Proterozoic Eon. The first video covered the Hadean and Archean eons, the first two eons of Earth's history. So unless you know about those already, check out the first video, it's linked in the description. And with that, let's dive in. 2,500 million years ago, the Archean Eon ended when cyanobacteria were so common that the oxygen level of the atmosphere skyrocketed, and the CO2 level drastically fell. This is the beginning of the Proterozoic Eon. The oxygen also caused the global cooling, and since oxygen was toxic to the living things at the time, 99% of life went extinct. However, a few bacteria and archaea adapted to live with oxygen. They spread across the world until after a few million decades, it was full of life once again. During the very early Proterozoic, the oxygen level kept fluctuating, and with it the global climate, but it all stabilized around 2,200 million years ago. The oxygen level was around 20%, and the global temperature hovered around 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Life forms during this time were all bacteria and archaea, simple and single-celled. For the most part, they couldn't get much larger than 100 micrometers. Here's why. A cell can only produce energy on its membrane or surface area. As an object gets bigger, its surface area increases by a power of 2, while the volume increases by a power of 3. Therefore, the bigger an object is, the more volume it has compared to surface area. So for cells, there's a limit to how big they can be without having too little surface area to produce energy for their large volume. But evolution was about to find a solution to this problem. 2,100 million years ago, an archaea gobbled up a bacteria. Of course, this is an ordinary and common occurrence. But what happened after that is arguably the most important thing that ever happened in the history of life. The archaea sustained and fed it, and therefore the bacteria did not need to do much, so it deleted 99% of its DNA. It focused on only one task, producing energy. It dedicated its entire internal volume as well as its surface area to that task, therefore producing far, far more energy than any cell membrane could. When the archaea reproduced, the bacteria reproduced too. Therefore, this archaea's descendants had a bacteria inside them as well, which we can now call a mitochondria. With the mitochondria giving them vast energy, those descendants started evolving very complex structures in their cell. Of course, the more complex the cell, the more DNA there is. So these complex archaea had to find a way to store their genetic information. They did so, developing a bag called a nucleus to organize all their DNA in. When the nucleus evolved, they became an entirely new group, called the eukaryote. These eukaryotes were all far bigger and more complex than archaea and bacteria, yet they were all still single-celled. Around 1,900 million years ago, a eukaryote ate a cyanobacteria. Again, this is an ordinary occurrence, but the cyanobacteria did not get digested. Therefore, instead of having to eat only other living things, the eukaryote became able to do what cyanobacteria did: convert sunlight and raw nutrients into energy, absorbing CO2 and pumping out oxygen in the process. This is called photosynthesis. Photosynthetic eukaryotes spread throughout the world, and the oxygen level climbed even higher. This isn't the only time photosynthesis appeared in eukaryotes, it's just the first time. Also around this time, the first sexual reproduction evolved. Basically, that means reproduction by mating, instead of just copying and pasting yourself, like bacteria and archaea do. I won't go into the details here, but sexual reproduction is more favorable for complex life forms. As many eukaryotes were quickly evolving more and more complexity, sexual reproduction soon became common among eukaryotes, but it never happened in archaea and bacteria. For hundreds of millions of years, though eukaryotes were quickly diversifying and evolving in many different ways, they all remained single-celled. That is, until 1,500 million years ago. Around that time, a colony of eukaryotic cells evolved to be so reliant on each other that each bunch of cells in the colony got their own special job. For example, some of them had to keep the colony free of diseases, others helped it digest food, and so on. This allowed for them to function far more efficiently as a colony, but they couldn't survive on their own. After all, if the only thing you can do is help other cells digest food, how are you going to do everything you need to do by yourself? As that entire colony was acting as a unified entity, this is the rise of the first multi-celled organism. This is the first time in history that a multi-celled organism evolved, but it's not the only time. Multicellularity has evolved independently more than 50 times in eukaryotes, but it hasn't evolved at all in bacteria or archaea. They are too simple for long-lasting teamwork. Many eukaryotes became multicelled in the following few hundred million years. Around 1,300 million years ago, we see the rise of the first living things that were macroscopic, or large enough to be seen with the human eye, like algae and fungi. Of course, this size required an immense amount of complexity and teamwork among the cells. Around 1,000 million years ago, a group of single-celled eukaryotes moved to land, which was already inhabited by a few bacteria and archaea. This group of eukaryotes that moved to land wasn't the only group to ever do so. It was just the first group. However, life in the ocean was still much more common than life on land. By 800 million years ago, two or more multi-celled macroscopic groups of eukaryotes evolved in the oceans, animals and ediacarans. The ediacarans were very mysterious and strange creatures who mostly ate microbes and were stuck to the sea floor. The first animals were also like blobs stuck to the sea floor. Around 780 million years ago, a volcanic eruption pumped loads of sulfur into the atmosphere, which cooled down the entire Earth, plunging it into a climate so cold that ice literally covered the entire world, including the equator. If you saw the Earth from space at the time, it would be plain white. But many of the orders of life forms, in fact, increased in diversity during this time. Evolution sped up. This contradicts the intuitive idea that cold weather would decrease biodiversity. After all, we do see more living things in the summer than in the winter. But it turns out when the Earth goes into a very deep freeze like this one, the glaciers wear away the rocks, causing minerals to spill into the ocean. These minerals contain nutrients like phosphorus. The extra nutrients were absorbed by the living things, causing populations to boom. Animals evolved into many different forms. The main types of animals back then were sponges, comb jellies, cnidarians like jellyfish and sea pens, and small worms called bilaterians. After the globe warmed up again around 680 million years ago, the diversity of life kept going strong. Now for a different reason. The Earth was very hot and tropical. Strange ediacarans dotted the sea floor, which unlike today, did not have a sandy surface layer. Instead, the sea floor was blanketed in a mat of bacteria. Animals were growing ever more diverse throughout the late Proterozoic. Ediacarans reached their peak around 565 million years ago, but started declining after that due to being outcompeted by the animals who were more complex and advanced. Some animals even became able to move. However, all animals and ediacarans still live in the ocean. 555 million years ago, bilaterians began emerging as the dominant group of animals. At first, bilaterians were mostly worm-like, but around 550 million years ago, we see the beginning of major animal lineages. For example, the arthropods, which include insects, spiders, and millipedes today. However, the ancestors of these lineages looked nothing like their modern descendants, and they weren't very common yet. But 542 million years ago, something happened, so monumental and dramatic that it would put an end to the Proterozoic era and be known as the biological Big Bang. What could it be? Find out in the next video of the History of the Earth series. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to my channel. Bye, see you next time!